Hello everyone, this is Padmanabh Reddy and welcome to Lit Critique. Today we'll be looking at one of the greatest thinkers of all time. She is not only a political thinker but also a feminist thinker as well. Yes, I am talking about Mary Wollstonecraft, one of the greatest feminist writers of all time and also considered the first kind of her kind. Although the term feminism wasn't coined back then when she was writing, but she became a really important writer and important person to study in the first wave of feminism and also in the contemporary literature as well. We'll also be looking at her greatest work, A Vindication of Rights of Women, and all the theory in the later videos. But for this video, I'll be focusing on her life, and her life is no less filmy, let me tell you. Her life has so many ups and downs and so many such turns and so many such events that it looks really filmy. She was born into a middle class family in 1759 in England, and they were well off family. That means I'm not again telling that they were too rich to do something, but they were considerably rich considering that they didn't had to work something to earn their bread. That means they had some amount of food and amount of land with them, a substantial amount of it, so that they can sustain themselves. And she was the second out of the 7 children, and she was the eldest daughter of them all. Her father was Edward John Wollstonecraft and her mother was Elizabeth Dixon, and her father had a delusion of being a gentleman, but he lost most of his money while gambling and while having alcohol and all those other things, and the family lost most of their money due to her father's escapades of losing money, and thus they became poor. So again, not exactly that poor that they come to the roads and all begging for food, not exactly that, but they had only enough money to send only the eldest son to school. So she didn't have a formal schooling of any kind, and even Mary Wollstonecraft had to surrender her own inheritance that she inherited while she was born, seeing the family conditions and all, because the family condition became so dire that she had no other option but to surrender her part of the inheritance. She had an abusive childhood as well. She recalls many such memories that she would stay beside her mother to protect her while her father used to come home drunk and would beat the hell out of her mother. These memories shaped her the person that she is, and she recalls everything in her book The Vindication of Rights of Women. As I've mentioned earlier that the family had only enough money to send the son to school. Her brother was educated as a lawyer, and most probably she wouldn't have been educated anyway, even if they had money, because educating women wasn't the priority of people back then as it is now. Although it is again debated that education of women today is again a debated topic, because many people even to this day don't recognize the education of women. They just don't want to send women to schools, women to colleges. It persists in many places all around the world, but back then it was on a different level. Like, people didn't want to send women to school because again they were termed as inferior to men, which she writes in her book as well. And she was and again this brings us to the question that how she was able to read and write. She befriended a clergyman and his wife in Yorkshire, and they taught her how to write, and this was the moment that she went into this path of self-learning. She is largely self-taught as well, and we will notice that when we read The Vindication of Rights of Women, because she quotes many writers. Like, she takes on Rousseau, she attacks Rousseau, she attacks Kant, she attacks even Locke and many other writers that are really important at that point of time. That literally means that she was reading a lot. She is self-taught and she was reading a lot. This literally shows us the zeal in her to learn as well as change the lifestyle that a conventional woman had at that point of time. She also befriended Fanny Blonde, a girl, and her influence was really tremendous on her. And this influence of Fanny Blonde on Mary Wollstonecraft is cited by many writers as acting as a catalyst for her thinking ability, as well as her thinking prowess, as well as her shaping of ideas that influenced her to write her later works as well, that became that became the engines for the feminist revolution to take place in the later years. One of Mary Wollstonecraft's sisters is Elizabeth, and she's very important for us to understand what Mary Wollstonecraft is and how she became in the later years as well. Because she was really close to Elizabeth, and when Elizabeth was married and she was in a bad marriage or a spousal dispute, as we call it, she helped her to get out of that marriage, that bad marriage, and this proved to be really tough for both of them because she tried really hard in the first place. Obviously, turning out a marriage and bringing a girl out of her marriage was really a terrible idea at that point of time, because when you're not married in 18th century or 17th century times, you're like doomed. I don't have another word for that, because women weren't independent at that point of time, because the women who could live on their own were the higher class or the upper class women, who had some significant amount of money with them. Also that at that point of time, again, women didn't have the property rights as well, so they couldn't inherit a large amount. They would be given some amount by their fathers and all. That's a different story altogether. But when we look at Elizabeth's story, so Mary Wollstonecraft tried really hard to bring her out of the marriage, and she succeeded in bringing her out of the marriage. And this really proved terrible, because Elizabeth's child was with her husband, and she literally was on the roads. She couldn't sustain herself, and she died soon later. And this had a tremendous impact on Mary Wollstonecraft, that she became a different kind of person after the whole incident. The public blamed Wollstonecraft for this death, because public viewed Wollstonecraft as a villain who brought out Elizabeth from her marriage, and in turn she left Elizabeth on the roads for her to die, because again, as I told earlier, she wasn't independent, and the idea of women being independent comes in her book as well, and we will talk about it in the later lectures. I'll give out a whole new section on that topic as well, on women being independent, and this is one of the key points that Wollstonecraft focuses on in the whole book. She also exercised all the legal options available for her to work. She worked in many places. She worked as a governess, and what exactly a governess is, let me just tell you in brief. A governess is a woman who is hired by rich families to teach their kids about some basic things like sewing clothes and writing the alphabets, like the most basic things before they send them to school. So you can think it kind of a kindergarten, but at that point of time kindergartens didn't exist, and governesses were hired to teach the kids about what exactly you need to know before going to school. And also governesses were like mentors, and Mary Wollstonecraft worked as a governess. She also worked as a translator. She also wrote her writings and all, which again I'll talk about the writings in the later part. And she also worked as a tutor, and also a teacher in a school that she and her sister and another friend of hers established. Although it was really promising, but in the later stages it was closed down due to many things. Because again, at that point of time, let me tell you about the society, because men earned the living back then, and women didn't work, and the women had only few options to work, and these were the only things that she could get into. She couldn't get into some public sphere, because again that was forbidden to women. And I'll talk about the public spheres part, because she talks about it in great detail in her book. Well, a key idea of Wollstonecraft is that education is really important for everyone. Let it be men, let it be women, it is important, equally important for everyone. But she doesn't term education as going to a school and getting a degree. Just like Plato said, education happens everywhere. And although she was a writer, she wrote books for a living, she wrote letters for a living, but again she was worried about the moral ramifications of the novels, because at that point of time the novels meant for ladies were only read by the high aristocratic females, because they didn't have anything else to do, because they had many servants with them. Even if she had children, if aristocratic women had children, she had many servants to give the children to, and they'll take care about everything. And the women literally had nothing to do, because they knew nothing to do at that point of time, because they were taught nothing to do. And this is also one of the points that she talks about in the book as well. And so she tells that these women, these high aristocratic women who read a lot of some pulp fiction and all the popular fiction, in those novels it is again forced upon women that it is really natural to be coy, to be really shy, and also again she tells about those things, that women have this kind of bad education and that literally destroys them. And this is also a key point that she points out in the book. And this idea of education she carries out throughout her life, and we'll look into that part also as we go forward in this lecture. One of the key persons that we need to know when we read about Mary Wollstonecraft's life is Joseph Johnson, who was a publisher in London, and he hires Mary Wollstonecraft for translations in German as well as many other languages that she knew. She translated many works of Salzmann and other writers into English. And what happened was, during this process she was introduced to many writers, and she read there a lot, and she was introduced to Enlightenment as well. And here she got one of the greatest resources of all time of her life as well, because I'm telling this because Joseph Johnson was the one who publishes her works after she completed them. So she got a publisher in hand, she got a publisher as a friend here. In 1792, she met a man named as Gilbert Imlay in France. So he was an American businessman who had come to France and to capitalize on the revolution that was taking place, because the French had blockaded the English shores, and the English goods couldn't come in, and the French actually trusted the Americans more than the English. And he would actually what Imlay would do was he would actually bring down the soap and many other essential commodities, and he would sell them to French soldiers and French citizens at a higher price. So this was a work that was done by Imlay, and she runs into him, and they fall in love. And she again, what Wollstonecraft does is she addresses herself as the wife of Imlay. So she loved Imlay dearly, and a daughter is born to them in the wedlock. Her name is Fanny, and Imlay would leave her and go around places, and she was really worried about him, as well as she loved him so much that she would pack her bags and take her daughter and run with him all the time to Paris, to Le Havre, to many other places. And when Imlay cheated on her and left her, she was devastated to the core, and he was a crushing blow to her life. And leaving of Imlay had a great impact on Wollstonecraft's life, and that shaped her as a person later, that we see in the book as well. The neglect of Imlay had caused a deep influence on her writings as well as her character as well. And the pain that she went through while suffering the neglect by Imlay was written by her in the letters that she wrote to Imlay. And letters, look, the excerpts of 2 letters that I'll be sharing with you, so that we understand what kind of trouble that she was going through and what kind of emotions that she was going through. One thing you mistake in my character and imagine that to be coldness, which is just the contrary. For when I am hurt by the person most dear to me, I must let out a whole torrent of emotions, in which tenderness would be uppermost, or stifle them altogether. And it appears to me almost a duty to stifle them when I imagine that I am treated with coldness. That was from the letter 12. Reading what you have written relative to the dissertation of women, I have often wondered how theory and practice could be so different, till I recollected that the sentiments of passion and the resolves of reason are very distinct. This was letter 36. Although there are many more letters that I can delve into and I can talk about them for an hour and 2 hours or 3 hours and so on. I can go on talking about them, but these two letters, somewhere I felt that I need to share them with you. And these two letters are really important for us to understand the torment that she was going through when she was being ignored by Imlay. And also these two letters are cited by many writers and many scholars as well. When I personally was reading about Mary Wollstonecraft, many scholars and many professors were citing these two letters as an example of what an actual torment could go into, the person could go into when when he or she is being ignored by the person that he or she loves the most. The year of 1795 was a difficult year for Wollstonecraft as she comes back to London, and now she notices that Imlay doesn't care at all, and also moreover he had been in an affair with an actress. And also now she attempts for a suicide. This was her first attempt of suicide, and Imlay saves her. And after Imlay saves her, both of them, they go for Norway and other Scandinavian countries for his commercial interests, and his commercial interests fail, and they come back to London again. Now after coming back to London again, she realizes that it's all over. He isn't coming back now anyway. And this time again she proposes an ultimatum to him: either they live together or else it's done. Either they marry or else it's done, because already she had been in a wedlock and she had a daughter. Her efforts to reconcile with Imlay were fruitless, and she decides to end everything with Imlay, and she does end everything with Imlay, and she jumps into River Thames in an attempt of suicide, and an unknown man saves her. And this again was a turning point in political as well as the literary history, because if she hadn't been saved that day, we wouldn't had the great writers like Mary Shelley. Obviously she was her daughter. We wouldn't have Mary Shelley, we wouldn't have Frankenstein, we wouldn't had Vindication of Rights of Women, the critical text that we study, as well as many writers cite that text as their inspiration to write novels later, like Simone de Beauvoir, Virginia Woolf, and many other feminist writers that cite Wollstonecraft as their inspiration to write their own texts. And we wouldn't have anything without that unknown man saving her from the River Thames. When she was on the trip with Imlay in Scandinavia, she wrote letters written during a short residence in Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. So she wrote the letters, and it is described beautifully by William Godwin as well. William Godwin praised this work a lot. The narrative of this voyage is before the world, and perhaps a book of travels that so irresistibly seizes on the heart, never in any other instance, found its way from the press. The occasional harshness and ruggedness of the character that diversify her vindication of the rights of women here totally disappear. If ever there was a book calculated to make a man in love with its author, this appears to me to be this book. She speaks of her sorrows in a way that fills us with melancholy and dissolves us in tenderness, and at the same time she displays a genius which commands all our admiration. Affliction had tempered her heart to a softness almost more than human, and the gentleness of her spirit seems precisely to accord with all the romance of unbounded attachment. Well, that was William Godwin, the husband of Mary Wollstonecraft, and they met in 1796. Although they met before in 1790, she also met another person named as Henry Fuseli. He was a painter, Swiss painter, and again she had a kind of a platonic or a romantic relationship with him, which is again really debated. And she had to break away and she had to part ways with Fuseli, because Fuseli was already married, and he had a child back home. So that was very poorly received back home, as well as among the critics and among the social circles as well. And when William Godwin and Mary Wollstonecraft met in 1790, they weren't really good friends. They first of all, they hated each other. But when they met later in 1796, and when William Godwin introduced her to many of his political circles, she kind of developed a friendship with him, and that turned into a romantic relationship. And she was again pregnant in the wedlock again. And to avoid situation which was really similar back with Gilbert Imlay. They decided to get married secretly in 1797. On August 30th, 1797, a child was born at their home named as Mary, whom we know as Mary Shelley, the great writer of Frankenstein. And there were complications during the pregnancy. After a long labor, Mary was born, and after the many complications and the general lack of hygiene, and also germ theory wasn't present at that point of time. And due to this lack of hygiene and also complications, she died a painful death, slow and painful death on 10th September. William Godwin was really devastated by the passing away of Mary Wollstonecraft, and in 1798 he publishes a book titled as Memoirs of the Author of A Vindication of Rights of Women, referencing to Mary Wollstonecraft. And it was meant to celebrate the life, and it was meant to actually give a tribute to his wife. But what happened was the total opposite. Actually, when it was published, it totally slashed away the reputation that Mary Wollstonecraft had. Because let me again tell you, in 1792, the Vindication of Rights of Women was actually published. It was just after she met William Godwin. She met William Godwin in 1790. In 1792, A Vindication of Rights of Women was published. Many people think that this book was actually negatively received, and it received a lot of criticism in the start, but that wasn't the case. When this book was published, many positive criticisms came to place, and it was actually really well received. But when William Godwin published the Memoirs of the Author of The Vindication of Rights of Women, that was a start of the falling of her reputation. Why did that happen? Because again, William Godwin, he didn't do that intentionally. What happened was he celebrated the life as it was, and people again started to view her as a negative character, because people again told that she taught a lot of virtues in the book, but in her life she didn't actually follow the same virtues that she taught. So this was some of the criticisms, and people again pointed that she intervened in her sister's marriage, and she had a lot of affairs, and a child born out of a wedlock, and many such things. Many of the unconventional lifestyle that Wollstonecraft actually lived, that everything was written by William Godwin. And actually he didn't do that intentionally, but it did the damage it did. And it took many decades to repair the kind of damage that book had caused. And later in the 19th century, in the 20th century, when the women's rights and the first wave of feminism came into place, this book again, The Vindication of Rights of Women, that actually gained the prominence that it deserved, and it came into the main picture. It came into the main spaces that people started to read, and also it became one of the greatest books that a woman has ever written. Although we have the text, The Vindication of Rights of Women, receiving many positive feedbacks after the first wave of feminism, the second wave of feminism, and even to this day, still there are many people to this day who believe that she had a really radical kind of lifestyle, and obviously she had, but many still don't like the kind of lifestyle that she had, the unconventional lifestyle that she had. And many of such points actually also feel to us that it is no big deal, but it actually is a big deal when we look at her time, because marrying twice, and also having a wedlock and having a child born out of a marriage, that too twice, itself is a radical thing. It is a radical thing even today. Many cultures around the world don't accept this kind of behavior by many people. And also what she advocated for, equal rights of women and men. Obviously she again doesn't state that explicitly, although overtones of her writing, we find that she only wrote for those who are really middle class people, because she again stated that okay, lower class people, they don't actually have much time to read and write, and obviously they had to work, and also basically they didn't have much time. And the upper class ones, they had a lot of money, but the middle class ones, they actually had time, and the bourgeois class actually came up that time. And I'll talk about all of those things. And also, one of the best things that I personally liked about Mary Wollstonecraft was she was a really brave writer for sure, because she took on many such male writers whom we actually study even today, like Rousseau, like Burke, like Locke and Kant, and many other writers. She took on every one of them, and most importantly, she took on Rousseau like anything, because she actually went on criticizing Rousseau's actual ideas, and also his most important educational tract called as Emile, and where he states that women shouldn't be educated with on par with men. A line that she had really problems with. Well, that was Mary Wollstonecraft's life story in a nutshell. I didn't get into many details because that would take an hour to complete. And now I hope I had given you an idea of what a kind of person Mary Wollstonecraft was, and what influenced her writings. And in the later videos, we'll look into the text, the Vindication of Rights of Women, carefully, and we'll look into all the themes, all the overarching ideas that Wollstonecraft has. And also, before that, I'll also give you a historical background of what exactly was happening at that point of time, the French Revolution and many other things. That I'll tell everything about that, although I'll not talk into every single detail of every such thing, but I'll give you an idea of what exactly was happening, and we'll get into detail into the text in the later videos, as I've mentioned a million times by now. And I hope I was able to give you the story of one of the greatest writers, one of the celebrated writers of all time, that is Mary Wollstonecraft. If you like this video, please do leave a like, and if you have any doubt, please put them in the comment box down below. I'll be reading all your doubts, and I'll be clearing them, all of them as well. Please do like and subscribe to all the social media handles of Lit Critique. I've given them in the description box down below. And don't forget to subscribe to Lit Critique. This is Padmanabh Reddy from Lit Critique signing off. Bye bye.